London, 1815. The chandeliers of Pembroke House burned like captive stars, their crystals scattering the waltz's rhythm across 100 powdered faces. Silk skirts whispered along the marble floor. Fans fluttered like birds in heat, and laughter, thin, bright, merciless, rippled through the air like the clinking of fragile glass. 7 years had passed since Miss Eleanor Harcourt last stood in such a room. 7 years since her name had been spoken not with admiration, but with ruin. Tonight she returned. She entered on her aunt's arm, a slender figure wrapped in ivory silk and composure. No diamonds, no feathers, just the quiet grace of someone who had forgotten how to belong. Her eyes, a calm gray blue, scanned the crowd as though every smile might conceal a dagger. And indeed many did. Whispers began before her second step, quick, delighted things that darted from mouth to mouth like moths to flame. Is that her? Harcourt's daughter. Returned from Bath, so they say. How brave. She used to be quite the beauty, before the scandal. Eleanor kept her chin high, her expression composed. But beneath her fan her hand trembled faintly. She had expected the gossip. What she had not expected was the sharp ache of recognition, the scent of beeswax and roses, the soft thunder of slippers against marble, the same chandeliers that had once witnessed her laughter. Memory returned like music one cannot stop hearing. The night of her debut, the promise whispered beneath a balcony, and the man who had broken her with his silence. The orchestra swelled. Dancers turned in perfect time. The gowns of the ladies a moving garden of color. Eleanor stood apart, her presence both invitation and exile. Then, as if London itself had conspired against her, the herald at the door announced in ringing tones, His Grace, the Duke of Wexford. A hush rippled through the crowd. Even the bows of the violin faltered for a breath. He entered, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair touched with the faintest silver at the temples. Lord Jonathan Wexford looked less like a duke and more like the ghost of something unfinished. The years had left their mark. A scar traced his jaw, faint but visible. His uniform carried the scent of battle and exile. Every woman in the room turned toward him, as if drawn by the same invisible thread. But he did not see them. His gaze found her instantly, as though the years had been only a blink. The air between them tightened. Eleanor's fan stilled mid-motion. She had imagined this meeting countless times, in dreams, in fury, in shame, but the reality was far crueler. For a single heartbeat, she saw not the Duke nor the hero of the peninsula, but the young officer who had once whispered that she was the only truth in a false world. He inclined his head, perfectly polite, the gesture of a man greeting a stranger. She returned the courtesy, her curtsy a blade honed by restraint. Their silence carried more weight than any conversation. Around them, the room began to breathe again, slowly, hesitantly, as though afraid to interrupt what had just passed between them. Her aunt, oblivious to the undercurrent, murmured, "Ah, Wexford. They say he carries Spain's honor on his shoulders. Such courage." "Yes," Eleanor replied softly. "He was always brave in uniform." Across the floor, Wexford was besieged by admirers. Gentlemen congratulating his victories, ladies simpering behind their masks of modesty. Yet even as he smiled and bowed, his attention drifted back, always, to her. The narrator in the ballroom, the gossip, the unseen conscience of London, could have told the story plainly. That 7 years ago, the Duke of Wexford had vanished to war days before their announced engagement, and within a fortnight, a rumor bloomed that Eleanor Harcourt had thrown herself at a married man. By the time she learned who had whispered it first, the damage was done. She fled to Bath, and he to battle. And rumor, like frost, had never quite melted away. Now, in the candlelit aftermath of glory, he was the darling of a season, and she, his reminder of what London forgives only men for. As the quadrille began, Wexford made his approach. Every head turned slightly, like flowers following the sun. Eleanor's pulse drummed beneath her corset, a rhythm both of dread and impossible longing. He paused before her and bowed. "Miss Harcourt," he said, his voice deeper, rasped by years and command. "It has been too long." "Indeed, Your Grace." Her words were porcelain, smooth, cold, unbreakable until touched too hard. His eyes searched hers for some trace of forgiveness, some flicker of recognition beyond the formal shell. But she offered none. He straightened, masking the faint tightening of his jaw with practiced composure. "I trust Bath was kind to you." "As kind as truth ever is," she said quietly. The silence between them stretched, the music swelling to fill it. They might have been two figures carved in marble, forever poised, never touching. Then a voice, shrill and amused, sliced through the tension. Lady Beatrice Langford, in rose-colored satin, leaned toward her companion. "How quaint that she should wear white," she said, not quietly enough, as though innocence could be recalled by fabric. Laughter fluttered around them. Eleanor did not flinch, but the color drained from her lips. The Duke's expression shifted, barely perceptible, but deadly. He turned to Beatrice, his tone calm, his smile civil. "Lady Beatrice," he said, "you mistake the matter. Some women wear white because they have endured every shade of pain and emerged untarnished." The room froze again. Beatrice's painted lips parted in shock. The nearby guests looked from one to the other, hungry for scandal. Eleanor met his eyes. 1 second, no more. Gratitude flickered there, quickly buried by pride. She inclined her head in cool acknowledgment, though her heart trembled under the weight of what had just been risked for her. The orchestra, uncertain, resumed its rhythm. The crowd began to move once more, though the air seemed thinner now, stretched taut by unspoken history. As the waltz began anew, Wexford stepped back. His voice, softer now, held a question she could not bear to answer. "May I hope," he murmured, "that this is not the last time we speak?" She hesitated, her eyes fixed on the ballroom doors, the same doors through which she had fled her ruin 7 years ago. "I no longer believe in hope, Your Grace," she said, and turned away. Behind her, the music swelled, triumphant and tragic all at once. And in the reflection of the chandelier's light, he watched her go, knowing that the war he had returned from was nothing compared to the one he had just begun. London did not forgive easily. It simply forgot until the next scandal came along. Yet that week, as grey carriages rattled through Grosvenor Square and drawing-rooms simmered with fresh gossip, it was Miss Harcourt and the Duke of Wexford who filled the whispers once again. No duel or death could so thrill society as the hint of a rekindled attachment where pride had once burned love to ash. Eleanor heard the murmurs before breakfast was served. Her aunt, the formidable Mrs. Pennington, read aloud from a letter scented with violets and venom. "Lady Beatrice writes that His Grace was seen speaking to you. Twice. Oh, Eleanor, they'll have you engaged by Sunday if you so much as look his way again." Eleanor buttered her toast with the serenity of someone who had survived worse than rumor. "Then I shall look elsewhere," she replied softly. "Perhaps Spain." Her aunt sighed, amused but anxious. "You jest. But Wexford is the prize of the season, returned with honor, unattached, richer than before. Society adores a soldier with scars." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Scars are not proof of virtue, aunt." And yet, later that afternoon, when she attended Lady Crawford's garden fete beneath a sky as pale as porcelain, she found herself searching for him. Roses bowed in the breeze, musicians played under a striped pavilion, and the scent of lilac drifted over every conversation. Her gown was lavender silk trimmed with white lace, too modest for notice, too elegant to escape it. Everywhere she turned, fans fluttered, and eyes lingered. He arrived just as the sun began to lower, his presence shifting the air. Wexford no longer wore uniform, but dark civilian attire, fitted and dignified. The scar along his jaw caught the light, a reminder that he had seen the world and survived it. Every bow, every murmur greeted him like a returning conqueror. But when his eyes found Eleanor by the fountain, his measured composure faltered. He approached without haste, offering the faintest bow. "Miss Harcourt, Your Grace." It was all propriety, until he reached into his coat and produced something small, wrapped in a silk handkerchief. "A token," he said, voice low enough for her alone. "I found it among my belongings from Spain. I believe it once belonged to you." Inside lay a pressed violet, flattened by time, still holding the faintest shadow of purple. She recognized it at once, the flower she had tucked into his lapel the night before he left for war. Eleanor's breath caught. "You kept this." "I did not mean to," he admitted. "Some things cling to us, no matter how far we go." Before she could answer, a laugh rang nearby, Lady Beatrice's again, sweet and cutting. "How touching," she said to her circle of admirers. "The Duke bringing relics from battle. Though I had heard he kept luckier charms than that." The ladies tittered. Beatrice stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Miss Harcourt, surely you must be flattered. The entire city knows His Grace has a generous heart. I dare say he collects hearts as other men collect medals." Eleanor's cheeks flushed, but her voice remained even. "Then perhaps one day he will tire of both." A dangerous silence followed. Beatrice's smile wavered. Wexford's gaze hardened, polite mask cracking for an instant. He bowed to the gossiping circle. "My lady," he said with icy courtesy, "the difference between a rumor and a relic is memory. One fades when truth is spoken aloud." Beatrice paled. Her admirers murmured excuses and dispersed, leaving the three of them standing amid the roses. Eleanor, mortified by the scene, turned away. "You should not have defended me," she whispered. "It will only feed them more." "I do not care what they feed on," he said. "Let them choke." The words struck her, not for their boldness, but for the raw honesty behind them. The man who had once obeyed duty above all now seemed to bow to none. She longed to believe him, yet her heart, burned once, could not trust the flame again. The fate dissolved into dusk. Lanterns flickered among the hedges, couples strolled toward the terrace, and a string quartet began a soft minuet. Wexford extended his hand. "Will you grant me a dance?" Eleanor hesitated. 7 years ago, I granted you my heart. It did not end well." He inclined his head slightly. "Then let us begin smaller." For one suspended moment, she nearly accepted. But sense prevailed, steady and cold. She stepped back. "No, Your Grace. I do not dance with memories." The refusal landed, gently but final. He bowed once more, and she left him standing by the fountain as music carried through the lavender air. That night, London dined on the story. By morning, the tale had twisted. The Duke of Wexford had offered Eleanor Harcourt a token of affection. She had refused it, or perhaps she had wept, or perhaps they had quarreled like lovers. No version agreed, yet each was certain she had been the cause. By noon, Lady Beatrice was seen whispering to the Duchess of Marlborough, and by evening the papers hinted at an impending announcement of engagement between Wexford and another. Eleanor read the line "by candlelight." The words swam before her eyes. She folded the paper carefully, as one might fold a letter from the dead, and locked it away in her escritoire beside the pressed violet he had returned. Outside, rain began to fall, a soft, steady rhythm against the glass. Somewhere across London, a carriage rolled to a stop before a grand townhouse. Wexford stepped down, water dripping from his coat, expression unreadable. The butler bowed. "You are expected, Your Grace. Lady Beatrice awaits." He paused at the threshold, eyes dark with thought. The thunder rumbled faintly beyond the rooftops, and the city seemed to hold its breath. "Then let her wait," he said, and walked into the storm. The rain had not ceased for 2 days, as though the heavens themselves mourned what London called love. Eleanor found peace only in the silence of the British Museum, its marble halls vast and echoing, its air scented faintly of parchment and dust. Here, no one whispered her name or measured her worth by diamonds. Here, she could read without the weight of eyes. Yet even within those sacred walls, memory followed her like a shadow that would not be dismissed. She sat beneath the tall windows of the reading room, gloved hands resting on a worn copy of Paradise Lost. The flicker of candles reflected off glass cases, catching on the curve of her cheek. A single droplet of rain trailed down the pane beside her, dividing the gray light. She envied its freedom to fall without consequence. When the door opened behind her, she did not turn. She heard boots, measured, certain, and new. The very air seemed to recognize him before she did. Miss Harcourt. Her name, spoken softly, carried more weight than any title. She closed the book with deliberate calm and faced him. The Duke stood a few paces away, his black coat glistening faintly with rain, his face lined with fatigue and something deeper, guilt, perhaps, or longing disguised as formality. "Your Grace," she replied, rising, "you should not be here." "I have no desire to be where I am unwelcome," he said quietly. "Yet I find myself unable to be elsewhere." Her composure faltered only for an instant. "You have many elsewheres, Your Grace. I am sure Lady Beatrice keeps one ready." He flinched at the name, as if struck. "That rumor is false. Rumors seldom are without purpose. Perhaps she spreads it herself. It would not be the first woman to claim what was never hers." He took a step closer, his expression grave. "And I was not the first man to lose what was mine through silence." Eleanor's voice trembled, not from fear, but exhaustion. "You speak as though we were possessions. We were people once. And people do not survive silence, they drown in it." He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time she saw the war's toll upon him. His eyes held that distant clarity of men who had seen too much. "Eleanor," he said softly, "you were not ruined by your doing. My father, the words caught. He forbade the marriage. He said the Harcourts would stain the line. He spread the rumor before I even left London. When I learned of it, it was too late. The letters I sent were burned. The world believed I had abandoned you." The rain outside pressed harder against the glass, 1,000 soft accusations. She drew in a sharp breath. "Your father's dead now, I presume." "He is. And the truth arrived 7 years too late." "I found his confession among his papers," Wexford continued. "He wrote that he had destroyed your reputation to preserve my name. He repented at the end. It does not absolve him, nor me." Eleanor sank back into her chair, the color fading from her face. "You let me think you betrayed me. I was at war. I wrote until I could no longer bear the silence that followed. When the letters returned unopened, I believed you despised me." She laughed softly, a sound more bitter than mirth. "How efficient a fate, to make fools of us both." He moved closer, enough that she could see the raindrops in his hair. "If I could trade every victory, every medal, to return to that night and speak—" "You would still have chosen duty," she interrupted. "You loved your honor more than me." "Then I mistook one for the other," he said. "And the cost was you." Silence fell between them again, the kind that presses against the ribs. Beyond the window, the city blurred into mist. She stared at the violet ribbon, still marking her page in Paradise Lost, thinking how aptly named the book was. "Do not ask me for forgiveness," she said at last. "There is nothing left to forgive." "I did not come for absolution," he said. "Only truth. You deserve to know that it was not your shame." Her eyes met his, steady, cold. "Truth does not warm what the years have frozen." He reached for the book she had been reading, tracing the gilt lettering with his gloved thumb. "Milton speaks of a fall, yet I think what follows it matters more." "Redemption?" she asked quietly. "Perhaps endurance." For the first time, her voice softened. "Endurance I know well, Your Grace. It is the art of surviving without expectation." He exhaled, the sound almost a sigh. "Then perhaps it is I who must learn from you." A clock struck the hour, solemn, echoing, final. She gathered her gloves, but before she could leave, his voice stopped her. "Eleanor," he said, and she turned. "I have waited 7 years to tell you the truth. Tell me I waited in vain, and I will go." Her lips parted, but no words came. In her silence lay all that could not be undone, the lost years, the tears swallowed in exile, the ache of what might have been. She walked past him, her perfume, violets and rain, brushing against the air between them. At the door, she paused. "I will not say you waited in vain," she whispered, "but I cannot yet say for what you wait." When she left, the Duke remained where he stood, the candlelight casting his shadow long across the marble floor. His hand closed around the violet ribbon she had left behind, trembling slightly, not with fear, but with hope reborn too late. The night of Lady Pembroke's masquerade unfolded like a fever dream, music, mirrors, and the murmur of secrets wrapped in silk. candles trembled in crystal sconces, throwing fragments of light across the marble floor, and the scent of orange blossom mingled with a faint spice of perfume and powdered wigs. Outside, carriages lined the square, their lamps flickering against the fog, while inside, London's most glittering hearts prepared to sin behind masks. Eleanor arrived late, as though hesitation itself were her escort. Her gown was silver, modest yet luminous, her mask of fine lace that covered her eyes, but not her composure. Each step drew a gaze, each whisper trailed behind her like a ribbon. She had sworn she would not attend, yet something unnamed had pulled her here, as if fate demanded one more wound before the healing. Her aunt had begged her to stay home. "They will talk, my dear," she had warned. "They always do." Eleanor had only smiled. Then let them talk to their reflection for once. Now, as she crossed the ballroom threshold, she felt that strange quietness of one standing on the edge of memory. Every chandelier seemed brighter, every laugh sharper. The masks gave courage to the cruel. She recognized none of them, and all of them. The same faces who once had smiled as her reputation burned now danced to waltzes played for other victims. And then she saw him, the Duke of Wexford, unmasked among masks. His defiance was its own disguise. He wore black, simple and unadorned, as if to mourn what London had forgotten. When their eyes met across the room, the orchestra faltered, just as it had the night of their reunion. This time she did not look away. He crossed the floor through the blur of feathers and jewels. "You should not have come," he said when he reached her. "Nor you," she replied. "It seems we both have a fondness for poor decisions." His mouth curved faintly, a soldier's smile, tired, half-broken. "Perhaps I came for forgiveness." "Forgiveness is not granted in public rooms, Your Grace. It is earned in silence." "Then let us find some," he said, offering his arm. She hesitated, then took it. He led her toward the terrace, where the night air cooled the fever of the ballroom. Beyond the French doors, the garden stretched in moonlight and mist. Lanterns swayed among the hedges, and fountains whispered what lovers could not. For a moment, they were no longer the Duke and the fallen debutante, but two souls suspended between past and possibility. He spoke first. "I have spent weeks searching for the right words. I thought confession would absolve us both, but it seems it has only sharpened the distance." "Because truth does not erase what time has carved," she said. "It only makes the scars visible." He turned toward her, eyes dark with longing. "Then let me live with them. I ask for nothing else." Her breath trembled. "Do not say such things. London already calls me foolish for believing you once. And yet you came tonight." "I came because I wanted to see the man you became," she said softly. "To know if the war had made you cruel or kind. I cannot yet decide." He took her hand, his touch reverent, uncertain. "I have been both, Eleanor, but never with you." Before she could answer, a voice pierced the night. "How charming," Lady Beatrice drawled, stepping into the lantern light, her mask a peacock's plume of malice. Behind her, several guests lingered, pretending not to listen. The Duke and his governess mused beneath the stars. How very sentimental. Eleanor froze. Wexford's hand fell away, his jaw tightening. "Lady Beatrice," he said evenly, "you tread where even scandal fears to walk." "Oh, but scandal lives for such walks, does it not?" she replied, smiling with venom. "We all know Miss Harcourt's talent for collecting sympathy and Duke's attention." The onlookers tittered, their laughter cutting through the night like glass. Eleanor's face burned, but her voice remained steady. "If you mean to wound me, my lady, you arrive years too late. I have already bled." Beatrice blinked, surprised by the quiet ferocity. But before she could retort, Wexford stepped forward, unflinching. "Enough. Your Grace." Silence. His voice was low, dangerous. "Miss Harcourt owes no one an explanation. She was wronged by lies I failed to correct. If London seeks scandal, let it be mine." A hush rippled through the group. Even the fountains seemed to pause. Beatrice's lips curled. "You would ruin yourself for her?" He smiled faintly. "You mistake ruin for redemption, my lady." Without another word, he removed his signet ring, the Wexford crest gleaming under moonlight, and pressed it into Eleanor's gloved palm. Gasps erupted. The gesture was unmistakable, the message undeniable. She stared at him, eyes wide. "Jonathan, no. I have hidden long enough," he said, his voice carrying through the air. "Let them whisper. I have done worse things than love an honest woman." The crowd stirred, scandal electrifying the night. Beatrice's mask trembled as her fury boiled beneath civility. "You disgrace yourself," she hissed. He looked at her with cool pity. "No, my lady. I only reveal what you never understood." The guests retreated slowly, their gossip already blooming like poisonous vines. Eleanor stood motionless, the ring burning against her palm as if forged from every unspoken word between them. "You cannot undo this," she whispered when the last onlooker disappeared. "I would not wish to," he replied. "You once said hope was a foolish thing. Allow me to be its fool." Her voice wavered. "I do not know whether to thank you or despise you." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps both." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The wind stirred her gown, and moonlight silvered her hair. He reached toward her, hesitant, almost afraid, and then stopped, as though touching her would make the moment too real to bear. "I will not force your forgiveness," he said finally, "but I will not hide my heart again." She closed her hand around the ring, trembling. "And if I cannot return it, then keep it," he said softly, "as proof that one man in this wretched city once chose truth over pride." The clock from within struck midnight, solemn and distant. She looked down at the ring, then up at him. "You've given them a scandal they'll never forget. Then let them remember what love costs," he said. Her lips parted, to argue, to plead, to surrender, but no sound came. Inside, the orchestra began a new waltz, and through the open doors, the golden room shimmered like another world they could never re-enter unchanged. He stepped back, leaving her standing beneath the lantern's glow, the ring glinting in her hand. And for the first time since her ruin, Eleanor Harcourt felt the world tilt, not toward disgrace, but toward something far more dangerous: hope. The morning of the charity ball dawned over London like a reluctant confession, its pale light gliding across rooftops wet with mist. By dusk, the city glittered again, as though determined to forget every sin it had whispered the night before. At Almac's assembly rooms, carriages lined the street in a procession of vanity, each bearing its own rumor and perfume. Inside, chandeliers blazed over a crowd already breathless with anticipation. Everyone knew the Duke of Wexford was to appear, and rumor swore he would announce his engagement, to whom no one could agree. Eleanor had not meant to attend. She had sworn it to herself that morning, standing by her window as rain trailed down the glass. But as the day waned, a quiet restlessness took root, part defiance, part longing. She could not bear the thought of hiding again, of letting society write her ending while she lived in its margins. So when her aunt's carriage arrived, she stepped inside, her gown of pale blue silk a mirror of the twilight sky, her hair bound with a single white ribbon. The ballroom was a cathedral of light, filled with faces she had known all her life yet could never quite call familiar. Murmurs followed her as she entered, softer than before, but still edged with curiosity. She felt them all, the glances, the judgments, the pity disguised as praise. But tonight, something within her refused to bend. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps it was the memory of a man who had looked at her as though she were not a cautionary tale, but a homecoming. He arrived soon after. The air shifted like a held breath as the herald's voice echoed, "His Grace, the Duke of Wexford." Every head turned. He stood framed by the entrance, immaculate in black, his expression unreadable. He greeted no one, bowed to no lady, offered no smile. His eyes sought only one person. And when he found her, the room's hum faltered, as if all sound bowed to the silence between them. Eleanor's pulse thundered. She forced herself to remain still, to appear indifferent as he crossed the floor. But the composure that had protected her for 7 years began to tremble, thread by thread. He stopped before her, bowing just low enough to make the crowd whisper anew. "Miss Harcourt," he said, his voice low yet carrying, "may I have the honor of this dance?" It was an impossible request. Everyone watched, some with delight, others with outrage. She could feel the burn of their stares, the weight of expectation. For a moment, she wanted to refuse, to shield herself, to flee. But then she remembered the ring hidden in her drawer, the violet ribbon he had kept through war, and the truth that had cost them both their peace. Slowly, she inclined her head. "You may." The orchestra began, hesitant at first, then swelling into grace. He led her onto the polished floor. Their hands met, gloved, proper, yet sparking with everything unsaid. The waltz carried them through a sea of watching eyes. Each turn drew them closer, every breath shared but unspoken. "You should not have come tonight," he murmured. "Then you do not know me as well as you think." His faint smile flickered. "I have known you in absence more deeply than most men know in presence." She met his gaze, steady now. "And what have you learned?" "That love endures only where pride ends," he said softly. She wanted to look away, to protect herself from the hope that shimmered there. "You risk too much by speaking so." "Then let me risk it all." The music swelled. For an instant, time fractured. The chandeliers blurred, the crowd faded, and the world narrowed to the rhythm of their steps. When the final note lingered and died, no applause followed. The silence was heavier, more complete. Every soul in the room felt it, the tremor of something true breaking through the veneer of civility. He released her hand only to kneel. Gasps rippled like wind through silk. The Duke of Wexford, hero of Spain, darling of London, bowed before the woman he had once lost. "Eleanor Harcourt," he said, his voice unwavering, "I have fought battles across continents, yet none so fierce as the one I waged against my own cowardice. I come not to ask permission from society, but forgiveness from the only heart I have ever called home. If love must scandalize to live, then let this be its loudest cry." A murmur rose, shock and wonder entwined. Eleanor stood motionless, the color draining from her cheeks. "Jonathan," she whispered, "you cannot." "I can," he said, "and I will. The truth deserves its witness." He drew from his coat the ring she had returned to him in secret, a simple band of gold now worn from time. With quiet reverence, he held it toward her. "Once I gave this to you in promise. Tonight I offer it in truth." The orchestra stilled. The entire room seemed to lean forward, every candle flickering as if holding its breath. Eleanor's eyes glistened. "Do you know what you ask of me? To forgive the world that broke me." "No," he said gently. "Only to remind it that you were never broken." Something in her, resistance, crumbled. The years of exile, the cruel whispers, the ache of lost youth, all of it trembled before the weight of that moment. Her voice, when it came, was barely more than air. "Then let them see." He rose, slipping the ring onto her finger. Applause did not come. Instead, a stunned, reverent silence filled the room, a silence that belonged not to society, but to truth itself. Her hand trembled within his. "They will not forgive you." He smiled faintly. "Then let them envy me." The orchestra resumed, hesitant, then triumphant. The light caught on her ring as they stood together, and in that fragile gleam, London's cruelest ballroom became, for one fleeting heartbeat, a sanctuary. The narrator's voice would later recall, it was not the kiss nor the promise that silenced the room, it was the courage to love, when all the world had forgotten how.